Awesome. Morning, everyone. So what I'm going to do is just back up Rich's slides and just show you what a day in the life of using this product is from a nice simple workflow, right? As Rich said, what we do is we prioritize the workload in the form of alerts. We're not a noisy tool. We're specifically designed to focus in on attacker behavior. And give you confidence in what we're actually showing you rather than an anomaly-driven tool. And how we do that is most of us, especially most of my customers, they are more reactive rather than proactive. So they will get an alert and then they will go, okay, I'm going to investigate that, right? You can completely control the times of alerts and when they are alerted to you in terms of scoring, but ultimately you will follow a link and you will hit this dashboard. You saw an example of this quadrant earlier, and Rich stole my analogy about the coffee, and absolutely that's where we're going, right? Critical is where you can start. So you can log in and you can say, oh, I've got 11 critical. That's where I need to focus my time here. Now, this is a demo dashboard. So we've injected it with examples. In reality, it won't be a noisy quadrant on that. We're a concurrent IP licensed product when it comes to Detect for Network, user driven when it's the M365 part. They're the most common sort of questions to ask when we're going into pricing here. But let's have a look at what these 11 hosts are doing here. Now, hosts or network entities in this sense, they will be anything consuming an IP address in this case. As Rich said, our bread and butter is the network. We can also do accounts, AAD accounts, Office 365 accounts, all of that good stuff. So what I've clicked here is I've got this quadrant. I'm actually just going to expand it to all. And top right, it's like the opposite of Gartner. Top right's where you don't want to be. Each one of these little dots are representing a host displaying attacker behavior. Okay, attacker behavior is scored in two ways because one of our main differentiators is that we give you that high fidelity alert. How do we get there? We measure in two ways. One, threat. Threat makes sense because we are a security focused tool. And based on how dangerous we are observing this behavior, because we are observing it based on what it is doing, we're going to give you that number. So that's simpler to understand. The higher the number, the worse it is. How we rule out anomalies and how we make sure that we're actually giving you information that's very security focused is the certainty part. The certainty is displaying, okay, based on what we've observed and how dangerous it is, and also the steps that they have gone through to string together their attack. Attackers don't just come in, land on the crown jewels and go, oh, look, I can easily exfiltrate this from here, right? There are a lot of techniques that they have to do to find their way around in an environment that they don't know. So let's say it's the subject of a phishing attack. They don't actually know how far they can go with those credentials, right? So they have to do reconnaissance. They have to do lateral movement. And those are what increases the certainty value, right? The certainty plays a huge part here. In the background, it's very complicated. How we present it is nice and simple. But ultimately, let me give you an example of what an anomaly, a useless anomaly is. And a useless anomaly is when you see, a user that got a new laptop on Friday because of whatever reason. It was old, they smashed it, whichever one. And then on Monday, they walk into one of your branch offices because they're a remote user, whatever, or they're usually remote and now they're in the office, and they connect to your internet and they Google something, because that is the basis of all life, right? Everyone Googles stuff. What that would trigger in an anomaly driven tool is a new host with a Mac IOU, a new account being used on that host that we've never observed before, and it's using a new UDP port out to the internet that also we have never observed before. That would potentially trigger 3 anomalies, right? Now, all that actually is a member of staff with a new laptop, and they are just going about their day-to-day in a different location, right? We reduce that noise by certainty because we see it all, we are not going to put it into the critical quadrant. And that's an example, right? If that new host with a new account suddenly started accessing privileged areas that we had never seen that have a high value, so suddenly started doing file share enumeration, then started spreading laterally to another host, that would be a clearer signal that that is actually someone abusing either a host in the environment or an account. So that's what we mean, and that's the value of certainty, and it does it automatically. Now, at the moment, I just got dots on the screen. Let's have a look at some sort of host here. So I've got Conrad here. I'm going to pick on Conrad. So if in reality, I'm going to get an alert, I need to know context. One of the big parts of what we do as well is if you just get an alert and you then need to go and look in 5 other systems to figure out what that host did to constitute getting an alert, that's not a very efficient investigation time. What we do is we give you an aerial view of all the detections here. We can give you an attack profile. It's designed to be simple to use. So if a user comes in and says, oh, this is ransomware, they instantly know most likely what's happened on this host, right? Because we know what ransomware is. This is actually an example of a more mature ransomware. It's not just something that gets onto laptops and starts to encrypt. It actually done a lot of reconnaissance work to get to something more central. We all know what ransomware is. It encrypts files, right? But look how much evidence we gave you before the worst happens. We absolutely see the exfiltration or the detonation or the worst case scenario that happens on a detonation point of view. But what we actually do for our customers is we give them confidence before the worst has happened so they can do something about it. That makes sense. Now I can see here that there was command and control, reconnaissance, accounts used. I'm going to drill into a couple of these in a minute. But what ransomware has started to detonate here, but that wasn't actually the worst part at this point, because a lot of my customers and a lot of people out there have invested in backup tools. So although it being convenient, get ransomware, they can recover about paying the Bitcoin fee, which if you are someone looking for Bitcoin fees is very inconvenient, right? So what they did was they stole the data also, and this is a very different problem, right? You've now got to figure out what data is gone. We can give you that, no problem. And you've got to tell people, relevant people, that data is gone, customers or whatever, and things like that. So we don't want to tell you after the horse bolted. We want to allow you to do something in these steps, the earlier stages of the attack. Now, if I want to drill into any of these behaviors, I can just click one more time and I get a full write-up. I've clicked into privilege anomaly. We actually have a lot of patents around how we do this, but ultimately we observe accounts and hosts and their privilege rights as well as service accounts, and we figure out how they are used together normally, baseline on other terms, right? The power of this is that we can identify things like an account takeover, suspicious admin, because people legitimately do things that are very consistent as users. They might use a different device, but they usually access or utilize the same privilege levels around their account. And it's not always the highest privilege that they have, right? So we go very deep into understanding that. What we've figured here is that there is a host Conrad and an account Conrad being used together. That's normal, quite often paired. However, they're accessing a service, which is a high privilege service, but it's not a service we have seen being accessed in this way before. Now, I can show you who normally accesses this, Anna, Luke and Jim. That's great. I can then do my due diligence if I was, an MDR analyst and say, let's just have a quick look what Conrad does as a role and what Alan, Luke and Jim do as a role. And I figured out that they're in different departments. So why are they utilizing this in this way, and we've never seen it. So therefore, you know, I can be very confident that Conrad is acting suspiciously, most likely because his credentials have gone. Now let's follow this story, right? If I click one more time, I can actually see that this here, what I've gone over now, is into an account of Conrad. And I can see that there's lots of account detections. In this case, I can see that there is a hybrid environment, Azure AD account, mapped to a network account, Conrad. This is the most common way that people are running their Active Directories. Not that many customers, in my experience, have fully migrated away from their on-prem. But if you are using any sort of SaaS from a service from Office 365, Azure AD is needed for that. So what they do is they hybrid it. And I can see here that the ransomware actually came in via email, still the most common way of malware getting in, and also the most common way of having account credentials stolen. So I can see suspicious sign-on here, DLL hijacking activity, and the fact that there has been some locked files already in my SharePoint, for example. Now, we go a lot deeper into understand the control plane. As Rich said, we are not looking at the anti-phishing, anti-spam. You've already got that. We are looking for when they fail and an attacker has compromised your environment. Now, we absolutely can show you all of the detail and context around this. Absolutely. However, what can we do about it is a big question hanging over most customers' sort of heads. They can identifying it as one thing, but we actually say, like, we're going to give you help on what to do with it. And our response approach is to use right tool for right job. There is not a blanket way of doing response well, right? In this case, I've got Active Directory integration here, and what I can do is disable this account, right? It's already disabled here, but I can go in, click the button, and temporarily disable this account using an API hook into Active Directory. This is a free integration, and take away the resource of that attacker. Now, that is a very surgical and reliable way of pausing that attacker's progression, especially after something like a suspicious sign-on, right? From that one. Now, that's great if it's an account-based attack. Now, what we also can do is, if you remember from Rich's slide about the ecosystem, is that we can integrate with other tools as well to make sure that we can give you the right response option. Now, we integrate with EDRs as well. EDRs are very good at what they do. They give you the deep and narrow of what's going on your host and endpoints, right? We give you the aerial view of what's going on in your environment. Using the two together just gives you more visibility and also more options to do something about something early on. And this is what I've got here. I've got a Defender ATP example. I think it's Defender for Endpoint now. I can't remember the name. Very popular in the sense that we can just pop that into an isolated environment as well. And this is a free integration also. If you have Defender ATP or any EDR, lock that host. This would make a lot of sense if you are seeing, you know, an endpoint being suspicious, and great if it hasn't spread laterally properly yet, right? We can also do things like integrate with firewalls. So when hidden HTTPS tunnels are found and you don't know, we can show you how many hosts are trying to connect to that. It would make much more sense to block any connectivity to that, you know, offending IP that's external to you, than lock every single host, right? For you to go and do something about it.